Hey everyone, welcome back to the Improv TX Comedy Network. If this is your first time checking out the podcast network, we appreciate it. Please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give the Improv TX Comedy Network a like. And just a reminder, the Improv TX Comedy Network is live on YouTube with all your favorite comedians on the improv stage. All links can be found in the description. And with that, on to the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the Act Out from Open Mic to the Big Stage. Comedians tell us how stories were made. Today I'm super excited. I have a very special guest. This guy always kills it on stage. He's very sarcastic in his, I don't know if that's the right word, sarcastic kind of in your approach, but it's hysterical, dude.
Thank you.
And I don't know, you have this gentle nature about you, but at the same time, you say some of the harshest I've ever heard. So it's a wonderful combination. You just released your album recently. Crockpots are amazing. Today we have Ryan Perrio. Ryan, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Another word I would use is cynical, because that's kind of how I was raised. That comes from me and my mother. Like, that's our conversations, is we're both cynical people, so we would just go back and forth on each other and we'd basically roast each other constantly.
So we'll get into it. I am curious about that, but how long have you been doing comedy?
I have been doing stand-ups for 16 years. I started in very end of the summer in 2006.
2006. Wow, 16 years. Mm-hmm. And it's been quite a journey, you said.
It has, because you don't realize how much work goes in. It's not just going to mics and stuff. It's internal work and just kind of looking at yourself and things of that nature, and kind of basically having your ego just completely sometimes just obliterated.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, you have a very unique personality on stage, and your tone and inflection is 100% you. And I was listening to your special today, Losing It. Everyone go listen to it. It's hysterical. You can find it on YouTube.
Yes, I put it on CD Baby, but Apple Music and Spotify still don't show it. Amazon Music does, so I've kind of looked around. I put it myself on YouTube because I was like, I don't think they're going to release the whole special in its entirety, so I put that on my YouTube, which is what I linked to.
That was recorded at Hyenas, is that right?
Yes.
So yeah, the special, go check that out. I want to talk about, what were you like growing up? Were you the funny kid, or were you shy, or how were you?
I was the only kid.
The only kid.
I'm an only child. I grew up with a family that basically just works hard. Like, my work ethic comes from my mom and my dad. They've never really had what I would call glamorous positions, but they would just put their heads down and work. Like, my dad started at, I would say the bank was First City, and he would count coins and stuff for the bank, and then he moved all the way up to when he was at Vault Services when Chase took over from Texas Commerce, which took over First City. And I mean, he was there, I would say, probably since I was like 11 or 12 years old, like until 2017.
Oh, wow. Wow. Same job the whole time. So
same job, but he just kept getting elevated. So he became like a director and stuff like that. But he stayed at that same company. So I've kind of done the same thing. My mom also has just been a legal secretary, a legal aide, does, court-related legal stuff. She will do stuff for like ERISA benefits and things of that nature, which is benefits for like people that are on welfare and stuff like that.
And so kind of like workaholics then a little bit.
Yes.
Just hardworking people.
Hardworking because they, have to raise a child. And
yeah. So what was your childhood like? Was it fun, or were you more like...
I was a solitary kid. So for the most part, I would be in my room. I would crave solitude. Like, there were times I'd love to hang and stuff, but like, sometimes I just wanted to just be alone. I still do. Like, I still, kind of crave that, like, oh...
You're an introvert.
Yeah. Okay. I would say I'm an introvert. It's just how I've always been. It's nothing that, like, I feel like it's good or bad. It's just, like, sometimes you just crave just being alone with your thoughts and everything else and not having an outside, I guess, stressor.
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you say that, I recognize that because I have high anxiety, and I love being an introvert. Like, I love being in my space, being left alone, no one bothering me, and my thoughts, like you said. But then I'm also extroverted, where I can want to go out and talk to people. So you were kind of introvert your whole life. How did you find comedy? What was like the opening door to that?
So the opening door for that, when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s and early 90s. So when I started, like, I would say I was like 13 or 14, my weekends were, I would just have a ritual of watching all night TV. Like, I would sleep late. I would wake up at like 11 a.m. And then while my mom went out and had her fun and stuff like that, I would stay up late and just watch a combination of a bunch of different things. Like, I would say about 9 p.m. I would turn on A&E, which was a cable channel that didn't It may still exist. I don't know if A&E has been bought by Discovery or has become Discovery, weird people. But it was a performing arts channel, so they would have a lot of ballet by day, like orchestra. But at night, they would have a show based around this club called An Evening at the Improv. And it was like a 30-minute to maybe an hour show where they would just take other comics that performed at either the Los Angeles or the New York Improv, and they would just videotape it. So you would see Paula Poundstone, you would see all these comedic, great comics from the early, like the glory days of stand-up in the 80s and 90s that people lived at, Bill Hicks, things like that. And I would start there. Then after that, there would be probably wrestling. They would replay like the wrestling on Fox. So you would jump over there for an hour, and that would be in the Sportatorium wrestling. And then after that, it would be around 9 or 10 o'clock. You would jump to some other comedy show or something like that. And then at 11 or so at night, the highlight of the evening, it would be USA Up All Night, and they would show B-reel movies, like things that we don't see anymore, or the B movies. I feel like that's an era of my generation that just kind of, like, just the terrible, like, it's going to be bad, but it's for a laugh because it's so terrible. Like,
right.
As a horror movie fan, you've probably seen a lot of the ridiculously cheesy Class A slasher.
Oh yes, and those are some of the best movies too, because they're just popcorn films. They're just fun and terrible, and then people are acting horrible, and you're just like, I love how they read that line. It's fun.
And so I would watch those, and so they would be either like a cheesy horror flick, or it would be like a cheesy, like, teenage 80s, American Pie-esque, like, coming of age, like, we're
The movies destroyed a generation.
Mm-hmm.
Objectify women, everyone. That's the way to go. So that kind of played into like your comedy, though.
Yeah.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be a comic and actually pursue it?
So I dabbled in it because I was really smart, and I was able to, during Y2K, I was able to get in the ground floor in tech support and stuff like that. So I was like, I got in the ground floor at a huge phone company with DSL, and that was the first idea of broadband internet when we first moved off dial-up to broadband. Since I got in the ground floor there, I moved through the company really quickly. I was young, I was really smart, I could figure things out on there. So I was, for someone that had no college degree, I was way high up in the chain. But I didn't realize in my youth that I could be I guess what you would call taken advantage. Like, they if they wanted you fired, I'd never realized how easy it is to lose a job, because I thought, I'm doing so good, why would anybody want to fire me? They'll, if they have a problem with me, they'll talk to me. And I found out I wasn't. But while I was there, they had a huge, I printed out like a 50-page document from a New York comic. I don't remember who his name was, but he had just put on there how to be a stand-up comic. And it was a long document of things you need to go to these open mics, do this every open mic, do these jokes, and then when this joke doesn't work and stuff. So it was a very interesting long read. And so I picked that up, thinking, well, maybe I'm going to try that at some point. I want to try stand-up. I didn't know if that would require me to go to New York. I was like, I will travel to New York, and that'll be my thing, is I'll go to New York and try stand-up in New York. Doors will open.
But so, wait, you found this on accident? Like, you were looking for...
I was just looking at comedy and stuff, because I was like, I really enjoy comedy. And so I found this document, and I printed it out, and I read it. I skimmed through it.
So how did you end up finding the open mics here, then? Seeing as, you were just kind of like, I'm not sure how to do this, I got to go to New York.
Yeah, so after I got fired from there, I was traumatized, and I worked at a contract job that was barely made ends meet, but it provided rent and things. So I worked there, and while I worked there, they ended up packing everything up and saying, hey, if you want to stay with us, we're moving to Victoria, Texas, and you'll make $9 an hour, or you got to find a new job. I was like, well, I'm going to find a new job. From there, I moved to a company that worked nights. And so when I left that job that was going to Victoria, Texas, because I thought, okay, this is another ground floor technology, porting cell phone numbers. This is going to be the wave of the future. If I can master this, then I'll have a niche employment for a while. I literally had a panic attack and just sat there and was like, what do you really want to do? And the idea of going back to college as somebody now in 2002, 2003 as a almost 30-year-old, thinking I'll be 35, 40 when I get out of college. Until then, I'm going to struggle to find anything.
Right.
And I started thinking, I've always wanted to try stand-up. And so from there, I walked over to Barnes & Noble, bought Judy Carter's Comedy Bible and stand-up comedy, both of her books. And while I worked at this TV company where I sent commercials to TV stations overnight, I would listen to comedy radio constantly. That's all I would listen to is like, because we just now had gotten internet radio. This was like the dawn of internet radio, Bob and Tom, all these different radio stations, and I would listen just to stand up over and over. And I just started looking up open mics, and the first one I found was Backdoor. And so
Very nice.
And so I was like, I'll do Backdoor at some point. But then I realized it's like, oh, all these open mics are at 7 or 8, and I work 6 p.m. to 3 a.m.
Oh, no.
So there's no way. Then, in a moment of weakness, I got angry and lost my job there. And so after that, I was like, well, this is a sign. I should try it, because at that point they had also Dane Cook's Tourgasm and things like that on there. And honestly, the day I got fired, I actually had a dream, because I had been watching like Dane Cook's Tourgasm, which has Robert Kelly on it, and Gary Goldman, who at the time Dane Cook made look like these guys are just like, Robert was an old wily vet at that point, and they made Gary Goldman look like this new kid that had never, that's is trying to be famous, and they just kind of felt like it's like they, kind of didn't think he would. And, like, you always felt like this doubt, like Gary Goldman, like he just never, to see where he was there and then now, it's so night and day. But it was just an interesting watch. And so I had a dream, and I literally was performing stand-up that I had, like, and it was like in a dark room, and I was on stage. It wasn't good jokes, but because in the dream you have really the slim dialogue. Like, I was just there, and like I was getting applause, and I woke up, and I think one of Dane Cook, like, there was a phrase in that show or something that, you got to do this or something, and that stuck in my head as I woke up. And so I wake up, I go to work, I get called in the office, and they're like, we're gonna have to let you go. And so I walked out, I was like, okay, this is a sign that I have to do it. And that was in May, and so I had a DWI at the same time, so I was afraid to drive. And my friend was in a motorcycle accident. I was going to go the week before, but my friend got into a motorcycle wreck, so I went and visited him in the hospital. Then I went back on and watched that weekend, and, because it was, if you've ever called Backdoor Comedy, it's a clean comedy club.
Clean comedy club. Linda
Stogner and Jan Norton.
Yeah.
But usually when you would call, you would get Jan, because Linda doesn't do phone and stuff like that. So Jan takes those reins, and she will intimidate you into being clean, because she stands up for what she wants this club to be. She's very direct. She's like, you got to be clean, and I'm know this, know that, no cuss words, no bathroom humor, no graphic, no sexual.
Yeah.
And in her delivery, it's like, if you do this, you're done. It's a very much like, it feels like this is if you make one mistake, it's over. And so you get really nervous. And one thing Jan resonated with me on the phone is like, why don't you come watch this week and just get a gauge on it? Because I'd hate for you to do, again, makes you feel like you cuss, they'll never book you again. And so I went up there, paid the $7, watched the show. And if you're thinking about doing it, I would say go watch some open mics. Just watch a couple, and just to get in your head, to kind of build the ego in your mind, I can do this. Because I think anybody can. A lot of people say I can't do this. Like, go watch open mic. Don't watch don't watch, Kathleen Madigan or something like that live and think, and let that intimidate you by how strong they are or how courageous they are on stage. You go to open mic where you can see people that are also struggling with stage fright.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
It makes it feel like, if that guy is up there and he's terrified, but he's still doing it, I can do it. Because professionals make it look fearless. The professionals come up here and they can, high five everybody and just seem like, they're connected to everybody in the room. But watch that person that's maybe, a step or two ahead of you on the journey. And, okay, he's super nervous, but he's at least giving it a go. And nobody's just out of the box and natural like these TV shows make it seem, or Netflix, that just, you walk on stage, and from the moment you're on stage to the moment you're off, you're getting laughs, applause, and standing ovations. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
So when that first time that you decided to finally go up, did you prepare material, or did you go up with a blank slate? Were you nervous?
I was nervous. I would say I was nervous, but also like you would constantly check on the people because at that point in Backdoor, I would say you had 7 professionals. Like Paul Verghese would come in from time, Mark Agee, Raj Sharma. That was when Linda kind of let people that are regular weekend performers also go up at open mic. And so you had this mismatch of people, and you would see a few pros, but the majority of people were just starting out. And so you had a lot of mix of people that are just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this. And I had a Word document printed out of 20 jokes that I was going to do, and I just threw it in the trash. Just out of nerves and I was like, the way people are writing, I'm like, there's no way this is any good. And so I went up there. And I only remember, like, the first line I did, because I don't know what else I did after. Because I had bits about, like, getting my hair cut, things like that. That were weird, but at the same time, like, it was things that happened to me and things I thought were weird. But I don't remember if I got to many of them, because I just felt like, I was like, I don't know. I don't want to... Everybody that seems scripted has, like, really, like, it's just seemed really... You get real self-conscious.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a lot. Like, even now, like, you talk to professionals, you ask them to maybe give them some feedback on jokes. And if you start criticizing the writing, like, I don't know if that gets laughs. Well, it's worked before.
Yeah.
You immediately...
Super sensitive. Yeah. Everyone is. Like,
yeah.
You start messing with somebody else's jokes, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, and so I learned, I was like, okay. I was like, I feel super self-conscious throwing this out here to a group of people that could judge me. And so I just went up there bare bones, and I got a laugh on the opening line of saying, I feel like I'm up here trying to disarm a bomb and things like that. And Lord knows that I just basically just set in motion a chain of 3 years straight of them. Like I basically clipped the wires and activated a bomb that would continuously detonate for every set for the next 2.5 to 3 years of comedy. And I would say, I left there, I called everybody, like, I would say it was so exhilarating. Like, I called everybody, like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Oh my God, this is amazing.
So you caught the buzz. You kind of got the adrenaline going. And
everybody does.
Yeah.
It is the biggest, public speaking is the biggest fear.
Yeah, 100%. And like you said, because of all the reasons, people are judging you, they're staring at you, you're the center of attention, It can be terrifying. And after you do it for the first time, it's exhilarating. It really is. I suggest everyone try it. If you've ever wanted to try comedy, just try it once. You're probably going to suck. You'll have fun. It's a good time.
You won't remember. Like, to me, it's just because you're in such a fight or flight panic. Like I said, I don't remember because I feel like my panic shut off because the lights are bright.
Yes. For me, that was the saving grace. When I got up here and the lights were blinding me, I was like, it's like a little bubble.
Yeah.
Like, I can't see anyone. It's fine. I'm in a safe place. And then my biggest fear was a heckler. And then finally it happened. I was just like, oh, well, that's what that's like.
Yeah.
So
my biggest fear was going over the light. And so that's why I hated it, because I would look into the lights like, oh my God, am I going to miss the light? It tells me to get off.
Because that's one of the things you don't want to break. You don't want to go past the light, people. Just don't do that.
Well, it's just the biggest sign of disrespect is that you see a light and you just continue to go on even though you're off just because you feel like you need more time. It's just one of those things where if you go under light, no one's ever complained, hey, you did way too short. Unless you're at a corporate event that's requiring you to do that, or if you get off 20 minutes early. Like if it's under 5 minutes, no one's going. And if you're a headliner and you do 42 and it's going great, no one's going to say, "Hey man, where's that other 3 minutes?" You know, they're going to be checks are going to be picked up. The staff may even like it because like, oh my God, we actually can get out of here.
Or hate it because we timed that out in our heads, and you're sitting there going, "Holy crap, he's done. My checks weren't dropped." So, but if it's only a couple minutes, it's not a big deal. When it's 15 to 20 minutes, like some comedians have done. Ooh, that's rough. But it's also going over the light, like you said. That's a huge thing. Like, don't do that. That's disrespectful to the club and everyone's time. And you're not that special.
Well, it's also a comedy show is designed that halfway through the headliner's set, checks are put down and picked up. So usually checks are dropped, I would say, about 20 minutes before show ends.
That's correct.
At that point, by going an extra 20 minutes now, That's 20 minutes of time that the club could have been selling more drinks. They could have been getting more tips. But now they're here 20 minutes, not getting, basically unpaid, just waiting for you. There are people that do that, and I understand in some of their journeys, they have gotten to a right to where they are a sold out show for 7 shows on a weekend from Thursday to Sunday. But it's just, to me, it just feels like we already know who you are. Why do you feel the need to talk longer? Are you getting paid more? Are you getting paid more by the minute? Or is there something that's not satisfied in you that you just feel that you have to assert yourself and show, oh, I'm worth 20 more minutes of your time?
Yeah. And also it's disrespectful to the headliner, because a feature doesn't need to do 45 minutes.
Yes.
That's way too long. You come in, do your 20 or whatever it is, and get out of there. You know what I mean? And let the headliner go over if they want to, and some will.
Yeah.
And I have that same fear, because once I can kind of time out, like I'm at 4 minutes, you know what I mean, in my head, and I see a clock usually, or I know we're getting there because I've timed out my jokes, I'll be like, should I wind down? And then it does get a little bit nerve-wracking, because you always want to end with that big joke too. You know what I mean? And so not to hit that, it's such a bummer whenever you go up. So.
Yeah. Here, you guys have a countdown timer that you show in the back of the room, so it gets stressful, because it's like you'll see 1 minute, and it's like you'll be starting your last bit. But I've also learned, it's like, as long as you're starting your last bit, at that point you're not like continuing another bit. You finish that bit and say there's like 5 seconds, then you start another bit. To me, that's the start of disrespect.
Absolutely.
Like when you know you could have just closed right there, but you want to throw one more in. Or if you start at a minute and it runs down to 0 while you're closing out, don't rush unless it's like a 10-minute bit. I would say if it's like a 2-minute bit and you're at 30 seconds in and the show's 0 on the clock, finish that next 90 seconds and get off on a big laugh. But if this is a 10-minute bit and you started at 1 minute left, you know better. You know at that point how long this bit was going to take, and you see how much time's on the clock.
I agree with you. It's totally disrespectful. What was it like the first time that you hosted a show, when you finally got that gig?
I would say at that point I was beaten down. So I told you, after the first set, I was unequivocally the worst comic in the city. But I understood that, and I would just go last. There is a couple open mics where literally people saw my name early and skipped me because they were afraid that I would walk the room.
What? They were afraid you would walk the room with your comedy? Mm-hmm. Like, was it... It was just about it that would walk the room?
I would just say it's a lot of stage fright. Like, I had a lot of uncomfortable stage fright issues, and so a lot of my jokes wouldn't get the response I wanted. Mm-hmm. And so I would fidget, I'd be nervous, I'd panic and stuff like that, and things just would not come out cleanly because I was always in my head just trying... Even with one-on-one conversations, like, it's so hard for me to go back and forth because I don't know when to put my side in and how long should it be. And because I'm thinking about that, I've totally missed what you've told me, and I'm like, what did they? Trying to kind of juggle all this in my brain. When you're in stand-up, there's a long period of time, and it varies from comic to comic. It's just a long period of what I like to call the old school Rolodex, and it's just spinning. And it's just like, okay, what do I want to do? And
right.
Because you have this multitask going on of, while you're talking to this room of, okay, what's next? You have the set in your mind, okay, what's going to be the next bit? And some people have it trained down to a science that they're going to do. If they do this joke, then, the next one is going to be this one. And when you do that, that's fine. But when you start doing it for guest spots or competitions and things like that, there's a panic that sets in. Because now your ego's at stake. You want to show these people, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
And so we used to have a contest here called the FCIT, mm-hmm. which it may come back. The first year we did it, that was when I broke out. But before then, literally, I was just the worst. And it's at some point I just sunk to acceptance in that phase, because a lot of times you don't want to accept that.
Oh, that's rough. What did that feel like when you were...
I was just like...
Because you've already got the stage fright going on.
Yeah.
And so on top of that, just thinking you were the worst.
Yeah. I was just like, you just take a drink and say, okay, I'm the worst. What are you going to do now? I made a decision in my head. It's like, okay. Because at that point also, when you admit that, you're thinking, okay, well, Netflix special, comedy album, Comedy Central, not my future. What are your goals now? And so my goal in 2007, 2008 was like, I want to be good enough that I can watch my video clip, because I had a video clip from 2007. It's on my old YouTube. And I was excited because it's like, all right, I can show my family. I was going to show my dad's side. My dad's seen me do stand-up maybe 2 times in my life. And so I was like, okay, I've got this video I'm going to show my family. And then when I pulled it up and watched it,
oh no,
I got so self-conscious. I was like, oh, can't pull it up. As like I just told them, I was like, oh, I can't get it here.
Oh no.
And so I was ashamed of it. I just basically, was like, okay, I guess, how are we going to get better? We just got to do open mics. And so I would go at every open mic that I could possibly, and also my life was crumbling at that point. Like I had been fired. I had to move back home with my family because I couldn't support myself. Then my mother got into a similar situation, so we had to live together for about 3 years. It was a lot of, I don't want to go home. So what mics are out here that I can do while I struggle through life? And so I would do every open mic every night of the week. And so I would just sit there and work, and I started to make little goals for myself. Like I was like, okay, let's work on the fidget. So it'd be like, okay, I want to try to stand in one spot for 1 minute of my 3-minute set. And so I would practice that, and I just would practice little things and get little goals. Like, okay, now I want to be able to make eye contact with the crowd. I want to be able to look out, because I would look at the ground a lot. And so I would constantly work on those things and just little things like that. And then at first, it wasn't called the FCIT, I think, the first year. I think it was FCI. It was like Funniest Comic in Dallas. The first year of the contest was wild, because I think the first year Sean just said, anybody that signs up is entered, and we're just going to do this. Because it literally lasted. I would say it started in December of 2008, and we didn't crown a champion until sometime in like December 2009.
Oh, wow.
It was a very long contest. It was like, I would say it was like 7 or 8 months, because we started it
and in a lot of ways, that's a bringer show too, right?
Yes, it was. Like I said, it was huge.
Yeah,
it was a huge thing. Paul won it that year. I think it was no contest. He was one of the top 3 comics, like him, Aryan Poor, Dave Little, Linda Stogner. They're like the top. And so my contest was actually the year or the day Obama got, I guess, sworn in. So it was like 1/20/09.
Yeah,
so it was like the 2008 election, and it bled over 2009. So I got my contest date probably in I think we all signed up in September, October, and we all got our dates, and Sean got me January 20th, 2009. And so from November to then, I practiced the same set verbatim everywhere I went, and I would do 10 to 12 mics a week, and I would just do that same 5 minutes over and over and over. And doing that, I think, got me to the point where I stopped caring. At some point, I just got beaten down. I was just, again, like I said, when I just realized that you're the worst comic this scene has right now.
Yeah.
If you want that to change, you'll have to do something about it. And so I just kept hammering that set. And then when I came to that first Funniest Comic contest, I could feel like I'd done tons of guest spots. I've done 20 guest spots at Hyenas and Improv here. I've done a couple, and they have all. This to me was the hardest stage for me. I don't know if it's just because it's so vertical, or if because it's the Improv, and you think, okay, I've got to impress the Improv. If I can get work here, that's going to open me up for improvs everywhere. It just became, again, because you start thinking about the stakes and the outcome, and already in your head have expectations of how this is going to go. And so I was just up here, and I literally walked on stage, and I had the same stage fright, panic, and things that I had always had. And I just, in my head, I just was frustrated, because it was just at that point, everything was just not working. I had just completely, absolutely never had a good set. And I was like, you want to change something? Do it. Just don't, because I'm a coward. And that's one of my biggest bugaboos in life, is that I'm always hesitant. I always I don't jump in the pool. I kind of slowly wade in. From that night, I cut loose, and I advanced to the semifinal round of the FCIT for the first year. And I came out of nowhere to basically, they stopped counting the votes because it was just me and Sean Arredondo.
Oh, wow.
Because it was written. At that point, they had a written tabulation, so they had to come back and get your written tabulation. And Paul comes back and tells me, it's not even close. And I was just breathing heavy. I was and everybody from there, people started putting me on shows, but I still did 8 to 10 open mics a week. I was like, okay, well, still got to work at this.
So you put in all that work at that time and changed it around. And I was going to say, you're so confident on stage. I would never think that you would have an issue. Do you even have the stage fright anymore?
A little bit. Like, I'm in a contest now at another comedy club, and there are times where I feel like, okay, I'm not getting them. I think a lot of it also helps with self-forgiveness. So there's a lot of young comics that take it on the chin that feel like I should be better than this. I'm like, in a way, we all feel that way, but you also have to forgive yourself because stand-up's a moment in time. You can't edit out stand-up like you could a video. Like people that do video comedy can retake and reshoot and patch together or do things like that. This is a one-time moment in a live audience that you just can't get back, and you just take that lesson with you and just forgive yourself. Hey, this is my first contest. You know what? I learned that, this time, advancing, that sometimes, if you're a stickler for the rules, that maybe, because I've been put on improv corporate shows a long time, and some of those have been some of the worst sets of my life. I love Jessica, but there were some shows that they just threw curveballs at you, and it just completely, I got like in my head, just like this comic, and I was like, I totally was rough. And like Ryan Perrio was also on one of those shows, and like he said, literally he was working for a company. He's like, his company asked me to do a show. He's like, you were great, the other comics sucked. I was like, oh, that's my show. I was like, I remember that.
Hey everyone, it's just Stuck jumping in to say thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you dig it, please head over to our website at improvtx.com, where you can check out our calendar for all the upcoming shows in Addison, Arlington, Houston, and San Antonio. And don't forget to follow our social media, all links in the description. And with that, back to the podcast.
But a lot of people have given me advice, like they've seen me relentlessly working. And some people, also inspired me by also, borderline bullying and challenging me and things like that to be better. And I've been a bully to myself because I'm an introvert and people have bullied me my whole life. So it's kind of how I roll. And so I try to coach people the same way. As somebody that's kind of at that phase of a veteran comic and people ask advice, I'm like, but you also, I do some performance tips and things like, I was like, you got to be looser. Some people, they have the same formula for every single line. It's every joke sounds exactly like the next one. I'm like, you gotta, at some point people get tired, they're going to know how you sound, and it just doesn't become a challenge anymore. They tune you up, it becomes a speech. And it's not because the jokes aren't funny, it's because the way you tell them is exactly the same way you've told the last 30. And so at joke 31, people are just kind of, it's just, if you keep hearing the same thing, people are going to just get a comfort level and tune out.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about my set, and I'm like, holy like, I got to change some stuff up now.
Ryan Perrio gave me that nugget. I did a comedy show with him. I think it was a benefit for Marcy, who I believe is on one of the chairs in their table here. She used to come to the Addison Improv regularly. She was a fan of all of ours, and she sadly passed away. And I think I was doing the weekend with him here with Pauly Shore. And he literally told me, he's like, some of the things you do are just so, you have just the same rhythm that you kind of lose steam because everybody hears you.
Yeah, that's kind of scary, man. You're giving such good advice just by going through your story. You know what I mean? Like, it sounds like it was a long learning process.
It was. And it's one of those things also where it's like people, always ask, like, they feel like there's a shortcut or if there's something that's not being told to them. And I'm like, it's just work. I listened to a comedy podcast from overseas called The Comedian's Comedian, which is a fantastic podcast. It's kind of, I know a little bit niche British comedy, but it's interesting to hear different concepts of how people do things. And some of the concepts I've learned from there was a comic who was like, video yourself, but only, but don't video yourself all the time. Video yourself once every 3 to 6 months. And he's like, because you're in a unique position to know how you're feeling in a specific moment. And you can see that from an audience member, like on the video. So if you're nervous, if you think, oh man, I was super nervous doing this joke, you can look at the monitor or the camera screen and say, that's what I look like when I am peak nervous. You can see that. And like, I learned what I look like, and I learned, when those feelings come up to kind of move away from that, to not let those get to me.
So you're pretty much constantly in your head questioning things.
Oh yeah.
But that also kind of goes into your comedy. You're very observational humor. and I like that. And you have storytelling jokes. You know, it's never one-liners or anything like that. It's part of not a long story usually, but like when you're special, you talk about getting pulled over by the cop and acting like you're deaf, which I'm not going to say anything more because it's hysterical and people need to go listen to it. But like, it's a great story. Is that true?
Part of it is.
Okay.
So I used to do it the honest way, which is I know how to say I am deaf, which is hearing closed, and I did that, and the cop like literally. I literally was getting away with it, like the panic and everything. Like he was panicking because he didn't know how to communicate with me. I didn't know how to, and I was like, I just can't give this away. And then when he said when I'm about to leave, I was like, you have a good night. He goes, you too. And then that's when he like,
oh no.
It's like, I was like, please, my mom is, just up the road. So this is right before I like hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And my mom it was in Euless, and my mom lived 2 freeway exits up in Euless. So she came and got me. And then he was like, about to take me to jail. And I was like, oh God.
Is that when you got the DUI?
No, the DUI came before I started stand-up. The DUI is kind of the impetus of like when I started stand-up. Like I had a breathalyzer in my car, and I learned ways around breathalyzing and stuff. Well, I just learned how to pace myself. Like you could have 1 drink an hour, and it would be diluted by the time you got to the breathalyzer.
So you still could have some drinks when you went out, because that's my problem. Is I like to drink when I go out and do like open mics and stuff like that, or even go on stage. I like to have 1 drink. Because there's some comedians who like to go on completely sober.
Yeah,
and then there's some that like to have a little lubrication. You seem like you're usually sober on stage.
I can go either way. I would say I think you have to be yourself, and by being yourself, you also have to understand it's a job. Like Paul Verghese told me that, like I would say my first 6 months into comedy, we were at open mic and somebody was acting outrageous. And Paul pulled me aside, he's like, you're at a job. You can drink at this job. That's one of the perks. But you're still at the job. You're still at the office. This is the water cooler. If you are doing things, that will get you talked about, then you're putting yourself in danger. This isn't. I understand that we're at a bar on a Tuesday and we're drinking, but it's still the office. And so I've always kind of adhered to that. Like there's always kind of the behavior of treat people with the same respect that I'd want and things like that, and not to try to be romantically or physically involved with other comics and things like that. But if it happens naturally, cool. Like if you're just talking with somebody and you vibe and you end up going out, that's great. But not to just immediately like, hey.
It's etiquette.
Yeah.
It's all etiquette, man.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is a lot of people don't understand that. There's a great Ralphie May, How Do You Do This, about etiquette, and he talks about all that. The big thing is like, don't date anyone who works at the comedy club too, because a lot of the people want to the servers, you know what I mean? And so don't do that. That's a big thing too. So I got to ask you what your writing process is like. Do you write it out freehand? Do you type it out? Is it all in your head?
It's 90% in my head. I don't write jokes. I write main ideas. I would have brought my notebook if I would have shown you, but it's very much like a squared off. Like I write 4 jokes to a page, but I just write what the subject matter is and kind of the main idea of the joke, and then I form around it, because I was kind of influenced by a lot of old comics that I would work with that would always say things the same way, the same time. And they would say things like, go with me on this. And I would look around the room like, why are we saying go with me on this? If nobody's like, oh, nobody is like. And so I never wanted to be the comic that just, because this is how I wrote it, this is how I've got to say it. And so I have a really good memory. And so I can free form an idea, and when I look at that idea, like, oh, that's what I meant. Or if it's not if I can't remember it, I can make something else out of this.
Really? So you just hold on to it pretty much. Wow, that sounds so complicated to me. I'm ADHD, so I got to write it out immediately.
Some people like write it out, but I just found myself rewriting over and over again. It's like, instead of saying this, I'll say, and I'll rewrite it, and I'm like, this is too much work.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a good memory. You know what I can do? I can write just name the topic, how we feel about it, and then we can form a joke out of that.
Yeah.
And so I've always tried to do that. Like I just try to freeform it, because I never want to be like beholden to doing my set one way. I want to be able to, if I had to, let's start with the deaf joke and roll from there. I don't want to have to say, okay, well, now that we've talked about some stuff about drinking, now we have to do the deaf joke. I want to be fluid. I want to not one set to sound like the other. Like, I want to be able to do multiple sets. And at one feature weekend, I did 4 or 5 different feature sets.
Oh, wow.
I just went through all my material and just kind of formed it around because I was like, I just want to know if I can.
That's talent. That takes a lot of, like you said, you have a great memory, but that just sounds so difficult, but it's very impressive. Like,
I had a set list and I was like, okay. Because I just never wanted to be like, let me just do one set list.
Yeah, I was wondering if you changed it up because I've never seen you do. I've seen the jokes a couple times, like the like the segments, but I've noticed that you always switch it up every time you go through. Because I was watching some videos, I was like, that's a different lineup than he did before. So that's crazy. You've given so much good advice already for comics. But what would be like your main advice for up-and-coming comics who are just starting out or people who want to try it out?
Just constantly go up. Like, there's no secret sauce. There's no magic formula. Everybody gets different skills at certain times. Some people have an initial skill of having 80 friends. And so, you know what? Those guys will get shows possibly before you who has 2 friends who, but does every single open mic. There's no right path. And so I feel like a lot of times, because comedy is a lot of ego.
Yeah.
Everybody feels that their way of doing it is the way to do it. And so when they see somebody else not doing it their way, but getting things that they would want, like the Schadenfreude and things like that you feel because, he got that because of 80 friends. Yeah. You know how much money a club makes off of 80 people? Why would they not? Why would a comedy club not take 80 drink sales for somebody to do 5 minutes?
Yep.
That's a huge trade-off.
And it does. It matters. So that's why social media following, in which you have a decent social media following, but like that makes a difference. It really does. If you want to get booked, get your social media going, and they will book you.
I just feel like there's so many different ways of getting booked. Like, it doesn't have to be one way. You don't have to just work on all of those things, but also don't neglect, don't be like, well, I'm only going to work on social media and TikToks, but I'm not going to do open mics.
Yeah.
You still got to do open mics.
Well, you won't have the talent. That's the problem. We have a lot of YouTubers who come through, or TikTok stars that come through, and it's like open mic, but they're headlining. And it's kind of like, well, you didn't put in the time. You didn't put in 16 years of, thinking you were the worst comedian in the city and then came back from that. It's a Rocky story almost, dude. I love it. So.
But it's just the hint of, like, to me, it's like, well, I'm here at the open mics. There's a reason I'm at open mics. It's because this is how I gotten better. And so I keep getting better. I was like, because it's never done. Like, a joke's never finished. Someone could say something to me today, and all of a sudden now I'll have to add that to the deaf, again, for the deaf DUI example. Oh, someone else said something about sign language that I've, I could probably roll that in. So,
your tags are amazing, by the way. Listening to your special today, like, I kept appreciating every single one. And like, when I thought you'd be done with a joke, you would hit it again. And so that was something that I was really enjoying. I thought was amazing. I just want to let you know that.
Thank you.
So cool.
It's so hard with that too, because it's like now I listen to that CD and I'm like, I've got more tags for each of these jokes, and it's like, or if you miss a tag, like, I didn't say that tag. And
what was the process of wanting to release the album like? Did you just decide, all right, I've got all this material and I want to...
I wanted to have something physical to remember, like, okay, so, because comedy's not forever. No one retires as a comedian. Comedy retires you. And you don't know when it's going to happen. For some people, it's 5 years. For people like Eddie Murphy and Jerry Seinfeld, those people that are fortunate enough to live a whole lifetime. Some people, tragically, like, Richard Pryor and Bill Hicks and stuff, they're retired because of the side effects of going through those thoughts and writing. And so that's always been my thing, is comedy retires you. It's not something you have no control over your comedy career until you have one. Ralph Barbosa does the same thing. Like, I saw Ralph at so many open mics, and it's like the people you see at open mics, like, oh my gosh, those are the people that are actually, maybe it's not the Ralph Barbosa, success story of, getting festivals and TV and things like that, but there's personal success in being able to command a room for 30 minutes on a level that is on par with, a Paul or Ralph or anybody like that.
Or
like,
yourself even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, listening to that album, I loved it because the laughs were genuine. And then there were some times where I could hear like a specific funny laugh or like a unique laugh. And I'm like, he's killing that guy right now. Like, I can't even imagine what the energy was like in the room, but it comes through in the special so well, just with the audio. Where do you want to see yourself in the next 5 years?
I just want to see myself like still doing stand-up. Like, I enjoy it. There's some personal life turmoil and stuff that I've kind of gone through. I'm not really good with upheaval. When things get shaky and stuff, I kind of shut down. And so, like, I stopped doing social media, I stopped emailing bookers and stuff, but I just want to continue to grow as a comic. And, part of that was just releasing an album that is 4 different feature sets rolled into one, and just kind of like...
That was 4 sets into one? You edited that down? Oh, that's crazy.
Travis Wright did an amazing job with that. Like, I give him all the credit in the world, because, I had this vision, because it's like I'd never wanted to do as a headliner, because as a headliner, the feeling you have is it's good, but it feels like the air is being let out of the balloon. Like, everybody knows you're the guy, so they're here to see you, and now you have all the distractions in the world, and you have one shot to do this. As a feature, the host has done everything for you. He's gotten the crowd silent and attentive. All you have to do is come up here and just do your best and just build, and the energy escalates. And so I always wanted to do it from the feature spot, because this is where I love to live. This is my favorite.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and then we edited it to one clip. So I was like, some of that's from Friday, some of it's from late Friday, some from early Saturday, some from late Saturday.
It works, though. It's great. And like I said, I wanted to listen to it again. I had so much fun. And like I said, laughing out loud in the middle of the night, walking my dog at 5 a.m. I was like, right on. So congratulations on it. It's so great. Let's talk about the podcast real quick. The Sum of All Fears. Where did this idea come from? You've done over 100 episodes almost?
I did 100 episodes. Again, because of emotional turmoil and everything, I've kind of put it on hiatus. But it was basically, I wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't want to do a comedy podcast, because I felt like the Joe Rogan Experience, Kill Tony, and all these other comedy podcasts, it's like they have trillions of listeners. You're a small fish in an infinitely large pond. And I was like, I wanted to try to do something different. I was like, let me be something I'm my own fish in my own pond, like it's nobody else's. And I started looking for like fun, fear. I was like, because one of the fun conversations I've always had with other people is like, when topic comes up, like, what are you afraid of? And it's something ridiculous, it's like, what? How did you? And it's usually like an interesting story behind it of, okay, like Mikey B, it's kind of one of his conversations. Like he doesn't eat beans because he was terrified of beans, because he had somebody force him to eat beans and traumatized him, and so he's never eaten beans since. And they can make him gag and stuff, because it's just that fear of being force fed. And I'm the same way with shrimp, because I had ordered fried shrimp one time and it wasn't what I expected. Ew. And I wouldn't eat them. My mom got upset with me, and it was a real ordeal.
Yeah.
And it was at a restaurant, Gallagher's, which was, I believe, based off the comedian Gallagher in the 80s. And so another reference to comedy is tragedy plus time. Is that time that I ate at a comedian's restaurant, didn't like the food, and was traumatized.
It was meant to be. So yeah, the podcast, you do talk about people's fears. I was on the podcast, and it was a little bit hard to do the podcast, because I had to be very vulnerable, and I'm not used to that. So it was one of those things where I was like, this is really unique and interesting, because we talked about my history and everything leading up to it, and then you allowed me to talk about my biggest fear. And so, 100 episodes, it's over 100 episodes, right? People got to go listen to it. They really do. And you're going to get back to it. You haven't done it since October, right?
Yes. I think December. I think I'm at 107, so it would be November, December, because it's I did one a week.
And so you're going to get it back up and going? Very nice.
I just done a lot of traveling as a comedian this year, and so it was like, oh, this is really hard to...
That's the way to do it, though. That's what you want. So, 5-year plan, you said you still want to be a comedian. Do you want to be traveling? Is that what you hope for?
Part of it, yes. But again, with my job situation, I don't know how that will work out. And so I'm just, part of it's like releasing the CD, see what happens. It's gotten some views on YouTube, and so I'm excited for that. And just enjoy, kind of get back to life. Just kind of, get through the upheaval of change, and just kind of like, okay, let's get back to consistency and doing stand-up, doing open mics, and having all these different things. Like, I've got technology now, trying to game the system of stand-up, and have a graphing things for all kinds of different comedy stuff. Like, I've got a scoring system now that I'm going to try to employ.
Wait, what? So, as you do jokes and, switch them up, you're going to give yourself points or something?
I have a set scoring system. So
wow.
And so I've invented that, and so I'm going to play with that and see how accurate it is. Because my goal this year, my New Year's resolution, was to have a new 45.
That's a lot of work.
and so I have a checklist I'm just going to take the average of the joke. Like, it could go a little bit longer, because you'll never, for people out there, also like my best friend, she is a comic as well, and she like always was like, I'll never know what 7 is. It's like, technically you won't. You know you have it, but you don't know what 3 jokes are going to equal 7 minutes.
Right.
Because it could be a great room, and now your 7 gets shrunk down to 6 because there's a minute of just hard laughs of waiting, just the time of waiting, the 10 to 15 seconds per each joke takes 45 to a minute out of your set that you would have done. On the flip side, if it's so bad, going so badly, you get nervous, you start to rush, you really start to roll through all these different punchlines, and now your 7 minutes is shrunk down to 4.5.
Yeah.
You're still looking for the light, like, oh my God, I've done 7.
Where am I going to go?
Yeah.
Oh, that's panic-ridden right there. That doesn't feel good. Well, I appreciate you being on. Let's do the socials real quick. I think everything's at Ryan Perrio, right?
Yep. That's the having a good, unique last name is very beneficial in the social media game.
And then ryanperrio.com also. You have a website, so you can go check that out. The Sum of All Fears is the podcast. You need to go listen to it, subscribe on everything. Sumofallfears.podbean.com is the main website, correct? And Ryan, thank you so much for being here and talking to me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone out there, please support local comedy in any way, shape, or form that you can. With that said, we will see you on the next one.
And there it is. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please head over to improvtx.com to check out all our upcoming shows at the Addison, Arlington, Houston, and San Antonio clubs. If you like this podcast, you might enjoy the other podcasts on the Improv TX Comedy Network. We have The Act Out. From open mics to the big stage, comedians tell us the story they've made, where I talk to comedians from all over and chat about their journey this far. Also, check out the Black Dog Retro Arcade podcast. Straight from the arcade, we talk about how our favorite games were made. That's right, we're talking all that video game goodness. And finally, we have Quacking Up, a storytelling podcast where we pick suggestions from a hat and tell stories based upon them. Once again, thank you so much for listening. Please check out our social media, all links in the description. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.